Good morning. Welcome to a short story review. So I am trying to read all my to-read books alphabetically, or at least some of them, some from each letter of the alphabet, and I'm up to K at the moment. Now, while I'm also reading Niftaline with The Wheel of Genre Boys, Bob and Zach, looking forward to talking to them about that pretty soon. I'm shoring up the corners and filling it out, the reading experience with short stories. Now, something beginning of K in this case is this copy of the Locus Awards, edited by Jonathan Strahan and Charles N. Brown. Don't know quite when or where I picked this up. I think I picked it up in January of last year, 2025. Haven't really touched it. I think I bought it because I felt I needed to read more good short stories and more recent fiction, rather than because I was actively enthusiastic about doing so. And as a result, I really haven't. Now, there's only one author in this book whose surname begins with K, and that's John Kessel, an American author that I hadn't heard of before, I don't think, and I don't think I've ever read anything of his either. Now, the Locus Awards, you may be aware of them. I'm barely aware of them, to be honest. It's a set of literary awards, and it started in the 70s, I do believe, being voted on by readers of the science fiction and fantasy magazine Locus. And the voting now is open to anyone, but votes of subscribers are worth twice as much as us proletariat. And it's got a lot of frequently nominated top-notch writers, and I think it's considered to be a bit of a gateway to some of the larger awards like Hugo and so forth. This particular edition, I don't know about the edition actually. The story Buffalo was first printed in 1991, and it won quite a few awards in 1992. Hang on, I should have read this first, shouldn't I? But I didn't. Okay, this is copyright 2004. They waited a while. Okay, well, anyway. So Buffalo was first published in 1991 in, I believe, the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. It won award the 1992 Locus, the 1992 Sturgeon Best Short Science Fiction, and it was nominated for Hugo and a Nebula. I'm not sure if it won either of those, to be honest. It was an interesting little story. I can see why it would win an award. It's very beautifully written. It's very skillfully written. It feels like a writer who's found a mature voice and is coming out of that. In terms of an actual science fiction story, though, it's a bit odd. So the main protagonist of this story is called Kessel, and it is apparently John Kessel's father. So John Kessel was born in Buffalo, New York. Buffalo as in the title of this story as well, which seems to be mostly about Buffalo, American history, and John Kessel's father. His father sounds like he was a bit of an itinerant worker. He worked all over the place, traveling around, until he eventually settled in Buffalo, where he'd never wanted to return to because he'd been born or grew up there. So, as I said, beautifully written. We've got Kessel as the main character. He's working as a tree lopper for something called the CCC. Civilian Conservation Corps camp in Fort Hunt, Virginia. And while this was a very well-written story, I didn't love it. It's certainly worth a 2.5, maybe even a 3 out of 5, purely because it's well-written, well thought out. It does what it plans to do, and it does it well. I'm just not its target audience. I've got very minimal idea of where and when a city called Buffalo is, and this seems to be a book about the city as much as anything else. Then we've got the history. They're talking about Roosevelt. I'm not entirely ignorant Australian. I do know there was a Roosevelt, but I don't know much about them. And I certainly don't know about the policies that they're talking about in here. I don't quite understand the social backdrop for this story. And the social backdrop seems to be a primary part of the story about young men in this particular era who are called Yankees or Polacks or Irish, and we're in 1934, by the way, and a whole heap of local data about the country and the society. Now, like I said, well written. I don't really have the background to be as fascinated by this as I suspect an American reader would be. Now, the shtick to this story that puts it slightly into the science fiction, or at least speculative fiction genre, is that while Kessel Sr. was working as a tree lopper with this conservation corps, I'm probably going to end up Googling the Civilian Conservation Corps, but I haven't yet. It sounds like unemployed people were sent to there, maybe voluntarily, but maybe not. I really don't quite get it. But apparently it was a real thing. And John Kessel Sr. worked for it. And while he was working for it, H.G. Wells visited the United States, including Washington, where he met with President Franklin Roosevelt. He was 68. And Wells was notoriously interested in social science fiction. He actually probably considered himself less of a science fiction writer and more of a writer trying to talk about social equity and inequity, the direction of the future of society and what it should do and how it should go about it. And that comes across well in this story. Now, H.G. Wells visited America, and I'm not sure if he visited the Conservation Corps or not, but Kessel Sr. had been a long-time reader of H.G. Wells and the science fiction fantasy magazines, but he didn't actually meet Wells, as far as we know, as far as his son is saying, while he was there. So this is the story of what would have happened if he had have met him and they had have had a discussion. And it also talks a little bit about Jazz Ellington's orchestra and a whole lot of other things. It touches on the notion of disillusionment with one's dreams and how they come about. It touches on the notion of social equity and a few other things. And it does it with a very light and very skillful hand. It is very well written and enjoyable to read. I just felt a little bit mystified as to why I was reading it while I did. I did enjoy it. I've got a feeling that I'll forget it quite fast because I've got so little context to put it into. However, good story by John Kessel. Apparently it's widely celebrated in the science fiction community, and certainly the locus community and the various award-giving communities of science fiction. Would read more John Kessel in the future if I happen to encounter it. I probably wouldn't, based on this one, be running out to search for some. But maybe a full novel. It looks like he's got a good half a dozen of those. So, if you know John Kessel, tell me more about him. Tell me which ones you loved. Tell me which ones you didn't. Tell me Kessel stuff, because I clearly don't know enough, and I'm probably not going to Google that. Thank you very much for watching, and read good books, and also read good short stories. Bye.